school that you grew up with. So
Yeah.
it's every fall in Long Beach. So obviously you missed this year.
Literally, going around, walking around and around and around, finding things.
You know, I'll be back here tomorrow. So we're here.
Okay, Kip, these t-shirts here, or?
Unfortunately, the only thing that we have, and the truth is only when I'm here, is I can sell books, but everything else has to be.
Yeah.
Because we don't have inventory, because it's
Right, no, I understand.
Yeah, so we don't have
Sizes,
inventory.
all
But
that.
I always bring books with me just because I can, yeah. I do, would you like me to? Sure. Whenever you're ready, I can give you my history. And would you like me to say? Sure. I am. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And there was probably about maybe the most a foot of clearance on both sides. So if we'd gotten our math wrong, we would have become screwed. But luckily, yeah, that 2 feet is just enough to get moving. Yeah, impressive. Yeah, it makes sense. And Novo Shiro came from Hawaii over here, so you know, it goes both ways. So Mark, yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, have you ever been to the Japanese classic car show in Long Beach? When we first came in here, it was 2 feet further to the left. And we're like, oh wait, that wasn't in the schematics. Yeah. Like, that's too narrow. Yeah. And I'm like, well, it's not load bearing. Would you be willing to just knock it down and build it up? Yeah. So, yeah, that's the whole fire. That's how she discovered extinguisher. That's fun. Were all rounded up and then forced into concentration camps all around the western states. And George left this behind with a good friend of his named Dick Phippen. And what Phippen later told George's son Walter is that for whatever reason, in camp, George made the decision that whenever he would get out, he was going to focus on work, he was going to focus on taking care of his young family, but he was going to leave behind his kind of youthful pursuits, including his interest in cars, and specifically his interest in this car, so much so that when George and his family came back to LA after the war, him and Dick were still friends, and the first few times they would hang out, Dick would ask, hey, George, like, how can I get your car back to you? And George would pretend as if Dick didn't even ask the question, because for the rest of his life, according to Dick, George never talked about this car ever again. To the extent where, again, every time Dick would bring it up, George would just pretend like it wasn't even raised, the question wasn't even out there. So Dick just stopped asking. To his credit, she's the person who processed it. She's a grad student, but she's the one who basically brought it together. Because I was like, she's one of her.
That one too, the middle was cool.
Yeah.
We heard it on.
That's cool. You drove it in here?
Yeah, this one we didn't even get in. It was just from the side. I like that.
Takes a lot of energy to have to put get it. Like I said, I'm glad they came. Oh yeah, no, I was couldn't see what happened. It was too much fun, so yeah, I'm glad that and then, as always, I was thinking about these things. I don't know. I don't want to leave it behind. You're so welcome. Thank you again for sharing your dad's story and sharing the book with us.
It's a great smell. So your exhaust smells like great. We have to do it. Curtis was the one who drove this one.
Here you will see like spectacular examples of like
Of
that
all the
generation
racial
that you grew up with. So
Yeah.
it's becoming a thing.
No. We wanted to go on.
Yeah, I'm glad you made it into the line.
Finally. Thank you.
I am. They're heavily involved in helping with the show. So they all bring their cars. And I mean that kind of started more conversations here just because so many people have a memory of 5G. They owned one, their parents or their friends did. So I mean it's such an iconic car. Yeah.
What's the most fun of 90 horsepower?
Yeah, exactly. Well, until you soup it up with like I'm sorry. Of course. Yeah, I would say this is now the largest, even though it's not like a Japanese American event, but it is the largest JA car event in the year now. Did you and your friends cruise these? We went to cruise it. So the earliest stories we found start around early 1970s. That's not to say that people weren't cruising it before then, but I think in the ways in which people talk about it as the cruise, that was in the 70s and 80s. Exactly, right. Yeah, but it's certainly by the 80s, like definitely. Yeah. Those little Crenshaw guys in the 70s, and they were like, oh no, we were cruising. You know, Crenshaw Festival, ECW was all like, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we didn't know the stories about doing 6 feet together. That doesn't mean it didn't happen.
No, one of the things. Because I believe.
For me, because no, that's the average. they're all like, yeah. When I went up to college, my day job. Most of my career. The card thing, I spent that position, and then years turned into decades. Which is something. And then 9 years ago, I was and his reply to me was on their own, so it was independent of me in 2018.
I didn't know a thing about it.
Right. Yeah. Right. It was shocking. Yeah, it was a fun film. We were watching it last night.
Just how culture.
Right. It tells, for example, the stories of Japanese-American car clubs from the 1950s and early 60s. So we have a few vintage jackets. We have car plaques from the same car clubs. We have their photos. We have the story about the Adamettes. The Adamettes were a girls' club that was formed also in Sawtell back in the early 1950s. One of the movies that will play above here is of the road trips that the Adamettes by themselves, so no adult chaperones, no boys, no men, just these women took in the early 20s. They would drive all across the state. They would go to Lake Tahoe because they wanted to explore more of California and the West, and they wanted to do it by themselves. So they all piled into a baby blue Chevy Bel Air driven by member, not Mary, Susan Uemura. And again, one of the videos on loop there is of their road trips back in the early 1960s. This footage right now saved the cruise. So the cruise, which informally started in the 1970s and became by the 1980s, the cruise was the single biggest Japanese-American car event of the year for like a generation of people. It was never, of course, official or formal, but by the time you get to the 1980s, during Nikkei week, you would have hundreds of people cruising the carnival grounds, and you can also see there would be thousands of people lined up on the sidewalks to watch all of these cars come through. The reason we have this footage, it says Glenn here. Glenn's brother shot this video because Glenn had broken his leg and couldn't make it to the cruise that year. So his brother, Little Tokyo, as part of the cruise, shot this. And this might sound weird, but I'm really glad that Glenn broke his leg, because if not for that, we wouldn't have this footage. And this is the only footage that we've come across of the cruise, even though this was around for at least 15 years. But back then, no one really thought to like bring video cameras or whatever to tape this. So it is by virtue of the fact that Glenn broke his leg that we have that foot. Missing the tailgate, he doesn't have the hood, which is great because you can see the engine that way. But the bodywork and the paint job would all be redone when we got it. This is Nadine's pro drift car when she was a drifter, and so she had this drift job redone just for the exhibition. The Purple Rain is always kept in that condition because it is a show car, and the Meteor has all its original patina because they wanted to show that much. Other questions?
So these pristine finishes, I mean, were they done for the exhibition, or were they always so beautifully kept?
For the most part, like Todd's car is very much something that is in car shows a lot, so he keeps it in immaculate condition. The Shimazu truck was, we put him in the screenplay, that would be about everybody.